Welcome to this edition of Talk with TAS. I'm your host, Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. TAS. I am welcoming back today Felicia Kelly Brookins. Felicia is an award-winning author. She's a screenwriter. She's a cultural healer, and she's a literary force. She's here today to unpack the quiet wounds of silence in our homes and how we build emotional wealth for our children and ourselves. If you've ever carried a weight that wasn't yours to bear, this is the episode for you. Today we're talking healing, we're talking truth and transformation. Felicia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Doc. It's always nice to be here with you.
Well, I feel that anytime that you're here, we're going to have some meaningful conversation that's going to be so helpful for others. So, Felicia, I know based upon your history, we won't go all into that your backstory has always been one of overcoming trauma and trying to help other people through your plays, through your book, to see how trauma actually impacts the home and the family. So, I was thinking about that and I'm like, okay, trauma is almost like a family heirloom that no one asked for,
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help women to recognize that what's being passed down to them and decide that it ends with them?
Well, first of all, let me just say I helped them initially by being able to help myself. And so what that looks like is looking in the mirror and admitting that's what that is, and that is where, what it comes, the things that it comes from, having to face the fact that I had fears, being honest and open with myself about actions that I've done and my reaction to things and where that comes from. And so me being able to do that for myself and with myself allowed me to be able to do that with other women through the forms of discussions and with the workbook that I've currently put together that is going to ask them a lot of hard questions, but I think it's going to ask them questions that are going to be able to free them. So I use this workbook as that tool, and I also use my theater production as a way for them to see themselves and open up to themselves.
So it sounds like, you're writing and you're speaking, the plays, it's all about liberating that voice. Because our voice is a vessel. And so it's like we're trying to open the mouth and let them actually speak their truth. What advice would you give to someone who's ready to break that silence, but fears the emotional cost to them?
I would say, first of all, to maybe start out by just sharing that with someone that you trust, a confidant. Try it out on them. Because their initial reaction, if they're a confidant or somebody that we really trust, we know that they love us, they're going to give us that additional courage and strength that we need, that boldness to go out and share it more publicly. So I would say, first of all, share that with somebody that you trust.
And I think that's so important, that safe space. Hopefully everybody has at least one person where they can be their authentic self and
Right.
share what's really in their hearts and let their
Yes.
voice be heard.
Yes.
But, we live in this world of social media, and a friend of mine calls it, but Facebook, I think she calls it fake book. I think it's what she used to call it, and so it's such a dominant force, a dominant driver.
Mhm.
And how would you guide families in confronting trauma when we have these curated lives, that we have online, but we're really not safe, but we've got these curated lives that people are actually viewing?
What I would say when it comes to families, first of all, if it is at all possible, to sit down with that family and talk to them. Even if you need to do it like individually, you may need to schedule a coffee date with somebody or lunch or breakfast and sit down one-on-one and talk with them about what you feel, what you discovered about yourself. And if apologies are necessary to do that, You may also want to go so far as to even ask them, that this is something that I want us to work through and heal together as a family privately, and maybe ask them, not to go, everything shouldn't be shared on social media. But if it is, and you have a family member that decides, well, hey, I want to tell the whole world about what happened between me and you or what you're going through. And if they choose to do that, when they do that, just let them know, at that point, there is a trust factor that's been damaged or broken, but I'm going to boldly, unashamedly, and unapologetically stand in the fact that that is the truth. No, and so I would say to families and to the individual that has to do that, be unapologetic about your truth. It's okay sometimes to be selfish. When it comes to trying to heal from trauma, it's about you.
When you talk, be unapologetically yourself, and you made the statement, when you're trying to heal from trauma, it's about you. And I think that's a point that I want the audience to really hear. It's about you. And we live in a world where it's about everybody else. It's never about that. They think, and they make you think that until you get your voice back and understand, I don't have to live at that address anymore. I can move because my voice is important. My voice has meaning. I have meaning. And that makes me think about this phrase, I think you use, relational poverty. How do you define relational wealth, and why is it a game changer for our families right now?
Relational wealth and relational poverty. It's really basically just like anything else that you may have a lot of or think you have enough of in your life, but then there's another area that you're lacking in. That relational poverty may be, deep down inside, I really wish I had a better relationship with my dad or with my aunt or with my grandmother than what we had. Because of what we had, I carry this trauma. But I so need your love. I so need you to accept me. I so need you to embrace me. I'm lacking that. I don't have it. And I need it so much from you. Now, this other person, maybe grandma. Oh, grandma gives me all love and more. She just spills it over. I'm full of it. But this other area where I'm lacking, it's affecting everything else that I do. And maybe before I didn't even realize that's what it was, but then I started to step back and notice. I paid attention. I became cautious and aware that when I'm around you, I feel different. I act different. Why is that? And I had to honestly say to myself, it's because I desire so much for you to love me and listen to me.
And Felicia, I love those terms, relational poverty, and then relational wealth, because we often inherit our relationship blueprints from our mothers, our grandmothers, and our fathers and grandfathers, but we inherit it from our elders. How, though, can women rewrite those blueprints while still honoring where they came from, or their truth, their authentic self?
Well, I think I can speak for me personally. The rewrite began with making a conscious decision that I would rewrite the way I handle things. I would rewrite the way I respond. I would rewrite the way I have relationships with different people, my fiance or boyfriend or husband. I would rewrite that myself. It began with a conscious decision to do that. That it stops here with me. This intergenerational trauma, this thing that's going down through the bloodline, whether it came through to mama or dad, through their mom or dad, it stops with me. And it also, I think it takes you remembering how you felt when it was done to you. That for me always, how did I feel when that was said to me or done to me in that way?
I think that what you've just shared is so powerful because it becomes the key. We're talking about a blueprint, but it really becomes the key to freedom, the key to stop the generational curses, as you just stated. And so I guess my question is, when I was seeing those as healthy boundaries, because when you begin to develop a different blueprint, you are actually protecting yourself, but you're doing that because you're setting boundaries. How can families learn to respect, not resent? Because so it's so easy to resent and become bitter because we're human, we're in the flesh. But how can we respect, not resent, but still protect those lines, those boundary lines, or those new blueprints that you're putting in place so that you feel safe? It can be your authentic self.
I believe that it is personal, that it's an individual thing. Yes, you're probably going to have some people that are in your family that are still going to say, no matter what, you still this or that way or whatever. But those individuals that love you enough to want to help you to heal, and they accept your truth and embrace it. I think the best way for family members to do that is to begin slowly themselves making a change, to be more concerned about you and how you feel in their space. What happens when we're in the same room together? Let me become more aware of maybe her body language or the look on her face, or let me be more aware of how I make her feel. So she shared this with me, that this happened, this trauma, and she's told me this is what she needs from me. So let me be more considerate of her feelings. And that little bit right there, I know can be very helpful to her because she told me that. And so packaging that is also empathy, compassion, with that love that you have for them, and a willingness. You have to be a family member that is willing to help them heal. And in the process, you find out that you may do some healing yourself.
That you didn't even know that you needed.
That you didn't even know you needed.
Felicia, there are lots of things going on right now. And you and I both belong to sororities, and we're in two different sororities. I have to mention it, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and then I'll let you mention yours. I'll give you that pleasure.
Oh, you can say Zeta and enunciate my T if you'd like. That's fine, friend.
But and then there are other things. We're involved in church and communities and things on our jobs. And if you got children still that you're raising, you're involved in that. And if you got older kids, you're still involved in that because they may be married or they're on their own. So much is going on. And so when I was prepping, I was thinking, what truth do women need to hear right now, even if it makes them uncomfortable? I'm not talking about a particular woman, but what is the truth that women need to hear right now, even if it makes them uncomfortable?
I would say that truth is that you really need to consider that sometimes some things have occurred in your life because of that trauma, and it was because of you. It may, of course, you came in with this trauma coat on, but the real reason you didn't end up married to the man that was the love of your life initially was because of you, because you were the aggressor. And every man is not going to stay with you like your daddy did your mama when you are physically abusive and verbally abusive and emotionally abusive to them. Now, I can't talk for nobody but me. Okay? So that's a hard truth that you have to accept, that was because of you. True enough, they may have done some things or said some things that, as you would say, piss you off, but the way that you handle it changed everything for them. And somehow in your mind, you were thinking, well, hey, my dad or my mom stayed with their partner or spouse, so you've got to stay with me, but they don't. And so the hard truth is that you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, that failed 90% probably because of me.
And that's a bitter pill to swallow.
That's a hard pill to swallow. You have to take a big gulp of water right there on that one right there.
Yeah, because that means I have to take accountability. Yes, things happen to me, but I can't always let that be my crutch. You and I've had many conversations, and you talk about when you got married, your husband didn't know all the stuff that was coming down the aisle with you.
Exactly.
He didn't know that. So, we have to take some accountability. My thing is, because life has happened to me, But my thing is, I believe we should have a moment where we can wallow. A moment. You can't wallow the rest of your life in that, because when
Absolutely.
you do, now to me, it's a relational poverty, because now I'm really not fit. We don't want to say it that way, but I'm saying it that way. I'm not fit for man, beast, or woman.
Right.
Because
Right.
I have no emotional intelligence, and I can't temper what I need to temper when something is happening, because I only, in my mind's eye, it's always someone else. It's never me, because I've never
Exactly.
dealt with my trauma. So, now this didn't just happen overnight, guys. So youth mental health is a national concern. We've had some conversations about that. What's the connection between a child's well-being and the mother's unhealed pain? Help me, somebody.
That right there is a fully loaded question. I would start with, again, I have to go to my own personal experiences. When it comes to being that child that is the one that is around all the trauma, all the violence, all of the abuse, the effect of it can be not only mental and emotional, but it can be physical. And it takes, I would say, you maturing and stepping out into this world and becoming involved in other relationships to even start to consider the fact that, oh, mama or dad they were traumatized themselves. What did grandma, grandpa, maybe an uncle do to them that made them react the way they did? Because now I realize this is learned behavior, and it's so common. And so you, as that child, when you step outside that door, I always say, now you have to go have relationships with other people. And it's in that time, if by the grace of God, you get a chance to open your eyes and your mind and say, my mom was unhealed because of some things that happened to her. And so with that will also come the forgiveness. So the connection is, I think, in the knowing. It's in the knowing. When you become aware, then you know. And that's the connection.
And it's still going to be a hard pill to swallow, because mama and daddy may never come into the knowing.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Light.
Right.
But you still got mom and daddy. You still got to interact with them. But you can't let their trauma now make your trauma even worse, because you already had trauma because you were growing up in a home where the person had unhealed trauma. But then now you're an adult and they still got unhealed trauma, and you're trying to heal. Where do I meet them in the middle so that I can have a decent relationship with my parents or whomever it is, knowing that person, they're still further, they've got a little ways to go on their journey to healing, and you may be further down the road. And access to mental health care is limited. Yet we know that technology like AI now is stepping in. What's your take on this, and where does self-worth fit in?
I'll say, for me, still there's nothing like a good sit down, a good face to face over a cup of coffee, or some tea, or a good meal, a mom daughter time, or maybe having some time with the person that may have hurt you in the past. And as you go into that space with them, now that you can, as the old folks say, treat them accordingly. You treat them like you know what I'm saying? I understand now a little better why you're this way. So when you say those things, or something you say or do triggers me, I can still respond differently, because now I know why you act that way. And so for me, that personal sit down, or maybe even it's a letter. AI is okay. It has its place. Social media has its place. Talking to somebody via video is fine, but there's nothing like being able to, if you need to touch that person, or when the conversation is all done, that we can actually hug it out. That if the tear falls from my face or from yours, I can wipe it away.
Exactly.
So I think those things are good in their place, but there is just nothing like that hug, that physical touch.
And physical touch is so important. And sometimes in families, individuals have to grow into that because they may have grown
Absolutely.
up in a home where they were not hugged as a child. And of course,
Absolutely.
that impacts, romantic relationships, because particularly if the
Absolutely.
other person grew up in a home where they were hugged, they were told, their parents would tell them, I love you. And then they're connected with someone and that person didn't have that same experience. Again, it's about, being able to hear without having passing judgment so that you can then begin to make some shifts and respecting that person's perspective of what their journey
Right.
has been.
And it's interesting you mentioned that about how people grow up, because that brings me back to when I was dating my husband and when I married him. One of the things that was strange to me was he would talk to his mom, his sisters, and they were always in their conversation with "I love you, I love you," and I was like, "What are you saying? I love you? Every time you talk on the phone, you say I love you." But that he grew up with that, and so he was used to that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do that. I was, But again, I made a conscious decision. So when I talk to my son on the phone, or if I'm here in the house with him, he's used to that now because I say, I love you. Whenever we hang up the phone, even with my husband, we say, I love you. So now it is commonplace to me. I'm used to that. But that was so different from me. I was like, that's your sister, your mom. Why you always say you love them when you talk to them on the phone? But he grew up like that.
And it means something.
Yeah.
Because if he were to get off the phone and he didn't say it,
I mean,
something's off.
what's wrong?
Yeah,
Yeah,
something's
I'm so
wrong.
used to it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's that thing you're used to. Just like the opposite could be, I'm so used to the trauma. I wear the coat, I don't even know that I have it on anymore.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good example. And it makes me think about our policymakers, because if they really wanted to help our teens, what's the one thing that you think might be missing when it comes to understanding the power of the home environment? Because that's what we just talked about. That home environment. Your husband grew up hearing, I love you. Well, okay, love you. You didn't grow up hearing that. I didn't grow up hearing that every time we got off the phone. I didn't grow up hearing that. So it's a shift for me as an
Exactly.
adult. So when we
Yes.
talk about, teen mental health, we know there's a rise in suicide rates, in particular men, boys. So what, for policymakers, what would you want them to understand that's missing when it comes to understanding the power of that child's home environment?
When it comes to policymakers, first of all, I would say I think we would be surprised at how many of those same policymakers are dealing with the same kinds of things in their homes. And so I think the common denominator in all of that, whether it's the policymakers' home or it's ours, is that people would rather just go along to get along than to have to deal with the pushback of trying to be different and do what works. Even with the policymakers, they make these policies, based on, well, this is just the way things are right now, and this is what's accepting. This gets the least pushback. So let's just do this, because they don't want to stand up for what is a basic foundational right that is really in the end going to make this child a better adult and help them to be able to have better relationships. It's going to help them to be respectable, have dignity for themselves, have high self-esteem for themselves, to respect others. But you don't want to do those things. You want to take the easy way out, and say, oh, well, you can't too much even say anything to your child. Just let them be themselves and do themselves. But they are children, and they still need what grandma gave us when it came to instruction and correction.
Yes.
Should it be done in an abusive manner? No. But you still should do it. That child is just that. They are children, and you are pouring into them. They're seeds. They're still growing. You're going to have to cultivate. Sometimes you got to pull some weeds. Sometimes you got to do a little cutting and pruning. And that pruning and cutting is what they don't want to do, because they don't want the backlash from it.
And Felicia, we've just begun this conversation, and you've hit it on the nail. They don't want the backlash. Policymakers don't want the backlash from it. But when you start looking at the epidemic that we're facing, we need to bring our parents together. We need to bring the educators together, the youth, because they can speak, and we need to hear their voices and understand it from their perspective. And of course, the lawmakers. We need to bring all of these people together, because people talk about a lost generation, but it's not a lost generation. It's generation. It's generations, because we're losing people in every generation, because we still are not addressing the trauma, and people are still afraid to talk about it, even at 60. Mama, they may not even be living anymore, but
they're still uncomfortable.
Very
it doesn't feel good to relive that when you never, talk through it. Or if you thought that you were healed and then you realize you feel something, and it triggers you and you say, I haven't felt that in years. Where does that come from? But when it happened, it grabbed me.
Yes.
I'm just speaking for me. Just a couple of weeks ago, it's interesting we're talking about this. Just out of nowhere, I just had this dream, and when it grabbed me, it was so tight. And I said to myself, I wonder if anybody else, when they deal with this, what about these people that feel this fear? Do you really know what real fear feels like? I'm not talking about just being scared. I'm talking about the gripping, paralyzing effect of real fear, to the point that when you wake up, you are exhausted and tired and you feel it all over your body. What is that? Where does that come from? That's a real fear, a real thing. And so, if you have thought you've done all the healing you could do, sometimes it may be just a little residue of something still there that can affect you. You have to choose how you're going to deal with that when you wake up in the morning. Now, that feeling had taken over me. It could have caused me to be in a really bad mood the rest of the day and be grumpy. But I chose to acknowledge that that's what it was. It was surprising and snuck in out of nowhere. But I also was aware and conscious of the fact that it's not their fault, my husband or my son. And so I have to deal with them in a manner that still shows, love and respect, and also take care of myself. So that's a lot to unpack in just that. Sometimes you still have some residue, but you got to acknowledge it. In order to sweep up the dirt, you got to realize the dirt is there on the floor. You know what I'm saying? You got to see it, look at it, and there it is.
And, there it is, Felicia. I thank you for being so transparent and vulnerable with the audience, because you're right. Sometimes we think, okay, I'm done with that. But I believe in reality, we're never done with it, because it is a piece of baggage that goes with me. It doesn't mean that it has to overtake me. Exactly. And I have to stay very aware. So as you talked about, when something triggers me, I get on that immediately, so it doesn't become a snowball effect, in understanding that that's my trauma that I got to deal with. I'm not going to put those feelings on somebody else. I'm not going to act out of character because I'm feeling some kind of way. And I think that that's so important. And I appreciate your sharing that with the audience. Now, Felicia, I know that there are going to be people who want to continue this conversation with you. How can the audience stay in touch with you?
Well, I am on Facebook at author Felicia Brookins, if they want to connect with me and follow my page there. Also, they can email me at authorfeliciabrookins@gmail.com.
All righty. Well, Felicia, author Felicia, you have been an inspiration to many, and thank you for still championing the needs of our teens, because they need that safe space, and you are constantly trying to figure out how to provide that so that they can talk about what they're experiencing. And that is so very, very important. So again, thank you for coming on Talk with TAS and sharing these resources with us. And I know the audience, they will follow you, because I know that we've planted a seed, and that's what we want to do, is plant a seed that if it's nurtured, it will grow, and someone will receive the fruit or whatever that tree is bearing that they need.
And some child will greatly appreciate that they did.
Yes, absolutely. Well, to my audience, thank you for joining me and Felicia. And before you go trying to take care of someone else, please make sure you take care of yourself first.